next, I'm going to take over here. And this is, I think, one of the ones that I don't want to say necessarily flew under the radar, but
Really? I've
it's,
seen people talk about it.
yeah, there are people that talked about it, but I think it mostly kind of um flew under the radar compared to stuff like Sakamoto Days or Zenshu. It definitely didn't make hype, although it was at least for me, it was one of the more anticipated series of the season. So which series am I talking about? The series I'm talking about is Flower and Asura. This is the localized title for Hana Saku, Shura no Gotoku. Um by the way, this is also known as HanaShura, right? So this is a manga original by Takeda Ayano. So Takeda Ayano might seem like a slightly familiar name for some. This is actually the author of the Hibike Euphonium original novels. So the infamous anime that was made by it was Kyoani, right? That did Hibike, or was it A1?
Yeah, it was Kiwani.
Okay, so yeah, Kyoani doing Hibike Euphonium, that infamous anime. It was actually the original novels were written by this author, as well as the art by Mushu, who is an artist behind a Claire Rouge, which is like girls love manga series. So good fit along. And this, I believe this is his Takeda Iona's second work, or sorry, yeah, this the author's second work. So uh, interesting continuation. Um, the animation studio doing this is Studio Bind. So Studio Bind, you guys, I guess some people more in tune with the anime industry might have kind of kept up with the studio. The studio has done Mushoku Tensei, it has done Onimai, and it has also done Jellyfish Can't Swim in the Night, also known as Yorokura. So it's
Wow,
done a
those are
lot of
all
very
award-winning series, especially Onimai.
those are yeah, it's like all these series are pretty iconic. They have been highlighted a decent amount by us. I think Yorokura is probably the
Who
quote
did
unquote
Onimai?
weakest one. Onimai, Dark did one. Yeah, Dark did Onimai, Nier did Mushoku Tensei, and I did Yorokura. I think probably Yorokura is quote unquote the weakest one out of the three uh kind of emblematic series that Studio
What did
Bind
I
did.
do?
But even Yorokura, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think you did anything. Um, Yorokura,
Wow, thanks.
What the fuck, bro?
Yorokura, yeah, Yorokura. I think is the weakest one out of the ones that Studio Bind kind of represent of their representative works, but even that I liked quite a bit from that studio. So this is an anime adaptation again by Studio Bind, plus like 500,000 subscribers, and Studio Bind brings together a mostly veteran team under the directorship of Ueno Ayumu, and this is his actually first directorial debut. And Studio Bond kind of uses their connections from their previous projects, again, in Mushoku Tensei, Onimai, and to a lesser extent, Yorokura, to bring together this relatively experienced team. For those of you who don't know, Wano Ayumu has done some like episode director and storyboard experience with Mushoku Tensei and projects outside of Studio Bond as well. Again, this is his first full directorial debut, so it's definitely an interesting project for him to take on. A lot of the other there's like experienced people, Fudeyasu Kazuyuki, Yogaya Masaru, who also worked on the music for Yorokura. Ayane Ko, who is an experienced animation director, comes from the connections related to Mushoku Tensei and Onimai and so on and so forth. So a pretty solid team overall, I would say. The I would say the voice acting cast is also quite interesting. So there are a lot of names in the supporting cast at the very least, who I think if you've watched anime in recent years, in the recent 5, 10 plus years, right, everybody should kind of have heard of these names floating around, right? Kakama Ai, Koshimizu Ami, Koga Aoi, Izumi Fuka, Ichino Sakana, Yusa Koji, Clara Konomi, Yamashita Seiichiro, Chiba Shoya, Ban Taito, Hikasa Yoka, Aoyama Yoshino, just like all these like A-listers out the wazoo.
Never heard of 'em.
Yeah.
Name one
Just it's
anime
just
they
some
were in.
random Japanese names. Yeah,
Name
just
one anime
random
they were in
Japanese
all
names.
together.
What?
At the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
name
at the
one
same
anime
time,
they were
yeah.
in all. They were in all at the same time.
Other than this one, yeah,
Damn.
I'd say, yeah, but yeah. Obviously, just some random Japanese names I happened to pull out of a hat. But also, the more interesting part is the two main characters. Fujidara Minori plays sort of the main character in Hariyama Hana. And this is she's actually a relative newcomer, but she has had a main hero role in uh last year, spring 2024. With regards to Himitsu no Aipri, which is I think one of like the precursor spin-offs, right? Or something. So she did have a main role last year, and she was, in my opinion, probably one of the contenders for newcomer of the year. But other than that new main role, she didn't really have much until this one, which is a second main role. And usually that's interesting because most people don't really get that much until they do a decent amount of supporting roles. So it's like interesting to have her pop up in one supporting role last year, and then it's like, or sorry, one main role last year, and this year she's also like, by the way, I have another main role in a pretty well-known anime adaptation. So good for her. And the other sort of main role is Shimabukuro Miyuri doing acting the role of Usurai Mizuki. And so Shimabukuro herself is quite a veteran. She did Carol, you might have heard her in at least a couple voices. She did Carol and Carol on Tuesday. She did Kimura in Yorokura. She did Yura in Yuragiso no Yuna-san, Somayuki in the New Fruits Basket, and I think the main hero, Nozomi, in Farewell, My Dear Kramer. So she has quite a bit of experience behind her, although obviously she's not like, her name brand isn't like Takai Shirie, right? But she has done quite a number of very solid roles. So very interesting cast overall, especially the main heroine role. So I would say they all do pretty well. Um, I think Yusa Koji acts out one of like the Kichijoji, who is like one of the teachers in the school in this like setting. And to do it, I believe he has to do this like very um like strong Kansai Ben leaning into Kyoto Ben kind of business. And it's very like he does it quite well. I don't think I forget if he's even like native Kansai slash Kyoto born, but he does the accent very well. And the other characters, I think Fujidera does quite a decent role as the main hero, and the other ones are pretty good as well. So, but yeah, Yusa Koji definitely takes the cake for me amongst the voice castings. Now, going on to the opening and ending, the opening theme is Jibun Kakume, My Own Revolution by Shishamo. So Shishamo is a pop rock band originating from Kanagawa, and uh, they do a pretty a nice simple J rock with minimal instrumentation and kind of focus on the female vocals. This relatively reminiscent of a late 2000s Annie song, especially with the visuals of the opening, which is to say it's a properly done like storyboard and visuals. People kind of the girl like running out like to chase like some dark like shadow or like some fading away shadow of her friend or stuff like that. Kind of going through the cast, and they're like on a boat or at a park, or all these sorts of like slice of life like running through station, adolescence, stuff like that. All these kind of like slightly animated, but mainly slice of life, like walking through the school and those sorts of storyboards. So it's not like nothing here is like super impressive, but it all works kind of to fit that slice of life, school life, adolescence kind of theme. So it's okay. That sort of setup again, as well as this sort of like simple J rock kind of thing, is again very reminiscent of a late 2000s Anisong setup, Anisong OP opening setup. So it works decently. I appreciate it. I don't think it's impressive. It doesn't win OP of the year, or even OP of the season, but it's nice.
But does it have a dance? Does it have a catchy dance?
No, it does not have a dance.
Lame.
All the characters are doing is just like walking through places or like running to
Like I
places. So
said, if you gotta be TikTok famous, you have to have a dance nowadays.
yeah, this is the age of viral marketing. They should have just like started doing like the Loka Loka dance or
Even
whatever it
even
is
even
in the middle.
even Fat Elf had a dance. That's saying something.
Fuck, you're right actually. But yeah, they did not have that dance. The ending is resonant, or also known, or I guess the Japanese is Doro, which is like resonant, kind of reverberating clear by Sato, which is short for Sato Moka. Her real name is Sato Moka, who is a J-pop singer songwriter from Okayama Prefecture. This is the there's like I think Sato provides very good and strong vocals here, as usual. I think from what I've heard of her songs, and this is actually an overall more energetic kind of ending than average. I do appreciate kind of it still has similar tones as to the opening Jin Kakume, in that sort of it spares a little bit more of the instrumentals by and focuses a bit more on the vocals. And again, I do appreciate that a little bit more. The ending is the storyboarding is also very similar to the opening, except there's less animation and just like more static, like panning of the boat, kind of uh, like the people on the boat, and the boat is just traveling across to an island or to the island, or they're just kind of like sitting at the park or something like that. So there's not much going on in terms of the visuals for either the OP or the AD, but they are serviceable. They're not like bad openings, but it's nothing to write home about. Going to the overall audio visuals, the OST and the sound direction are quite good. Both the OST, like the actual tracks themselves, as well as the sound direction in terms of like how the OST comes in and out when it's needed, as opposed to it being kind of this like backbone of every scene, which some anime series have, which is kind of like iffy for me. This also kind of helps makes the series overall more quiet, so you can focus on the character dialogue and introspections. And this is something I kind of mentioned during my Shoshimin review, uh and it's what I appreciate about a series like Shoshimin, or um to a lesser extent Kyoka and some like other Kyoani stuff, because a lot of like the times when they hire these like more prolific sound directors and veteran sound directors, they with these series, the right ones, they really know how to like kind of properly like ebb in and out and kind of focus on the voices where needed. And I think that's really important in these sorts of series where it's not like just, wow, we're gonna go get him. Like that, it's not that sort of anime, right? This is a little bit more quiet. It's a little bit more calm, more modest. It's just about everyday life, people doing everyday things. So I think that's having that sort of music is like you don't notice it as much, but it's important to having setting up that overall atmosphere. So that's I do appreciate that. The visuals themselves are fine slash decent for more slice of life series, especially since there are no super complex animations that are required for the majority of the scenes. So obviously, because the majority of the scenes here is the girls or the school kids being at school and just kind of talking to each other, right? And it's not like a sports series, so they're kind of just talking. It's like reciting poetry and doing stuff like that. Um, so there's not much animation in the majority of these scenes, but almost every episode there will be this like specific scene where somebody's reading poetry and it's like really striking, and there's like an animation related a company animation for that. Like somebody will look at the person reciting the poetry and they'll see like a picture of like them being submerged in the water or being pulled by vines or stuff like that. So there's this like that sort of animation. Again, reminiscent of something like a Shoshimin or like a Kyoko or something like that, right? And these sorts of like introspection or retrospection or like poem or recitation visualization scenes, right? uh the way that where it becomes animated in these different ways is very well done in terms of the keyframes, but you can kind of tell that there was like a slightly limited budget for this because the like animations, like the in between, like how smooth the overall animations are a little bit iffy. And that's not really me talking down to the overall studio. I know, again, they have a limited budget, but it is slightly noticeable and it's a little bit unfortunate. But the overall, like the way it's like designed and like drawn and how the key frames are perfect, are fine, I think. So that's pretty much all I had to say about the audiovisuals. So going on to the overall series, I'll just read off the premise real quick. So Hana, the kind of black hair girl in the main poster art, lives on the small island of Tonakijima with a population of 600 and loves reading to the island's children. Mizuki, this is the blonde hair girl in the poster arts, the president of the school's broadcasting club, notices Hana's talent for engaging others through her storytelling and invites her to join the club. As Hana embarks on this new journey, she experiences many firsts with the broadcasting club members, deepening her love for reading even more. So yeah, she really likes listening to and like reciting passages and like poetry and stuff like that. Even when she was young, and she was like watching stuff like poetry competitions, she's been like too shy and like too reserved and to join stuff like the broadcasting club and like after school clubs. But Mizuki, the blonde-haired, short bangs president of the president of the school's broadcasting club, uh, kind of urges her in the first episode to kind of like really just join the club and just take a try. And driven by her desires, Hana indulges, joins the broadcasting club, meets a bunch of the other cast members, and from there, a lot of it's kind of like um, there's a lot of talking, by the way. But yeah,
You
most of the
guys,
scenes in
you
episode,
guys ever
yeah.
join the broadcasting club?
Um, I there was no broadcasting club in my school per se, but there was like all sorts of like forensic, like parliamentary stuff, parliamentary.
Ah,
There was like
nerd.
recitation. Like I forget if there was a drama club. I was in the debate club, and there was a lot
Uh,
of that sort of stuff. And it's very similar in terms of like having to focus on rhetoric, the way of speaking, so on. So
you guys ever have like random 30-year-old guys pull up to your school and ask you to play some tunes while you're in the broadcasting club at like 9 p.m.? That was fun.
no.
I wasn't even in the
Um,
broadcasting club. I was one of my friends was, and I just stayed behind because I thought it was cool.
nice. Yeah, I mean, a lot of that seems pretty chill. But yeah, a lot of the scenes after episode one of this anime are focused on the different parts of doing stuff like broadcasting club or like recitations, training for stuff like forensics or rhetorical stuff, etc. And this has like a lot of real life trivia, like how to read specific passages or like how these like certain accents should be read according to this like book or whatever that actually exists in real life. Um,
How
so
political does this series get?
it doesn't get political at all.
As like
Um,
no current events or anything in the broadcasting club?
no current events. This is like relatively agnostic. Um, there's an interesting kind of bento where it does a lot of the trivia is focused around kind of competing. So it's like competitive, like poetry recitations and like kind of doing this sort of stuff. And
You know what that sounds like?
what?
That sounds like a rap battle, but with more steps.
Um, Somewhat. Again, at the end, they kind of like a lot of this sort of stuff, something like rap battle, stuff like debate. A lot of that kind of boils down to similar skill sets. But yeah, the this sort of set of trivia that they mention and talk about in the series with regards to recitation, with regards to broadcasting, with regards to like how you should read like poetry or whatever out loud properly, this sort of set of trivia acts as the main vehicle or the vessel in the story for the characters to start kind of loading in about their own past and their personalities and what their personal hurdles are, struggles are, and so on and so forth. And again, this is a very standard setup, right? We've seen this a million times before, especially in anime about like cute girls doing cute stuff, right? It's like you have a theme, like whether it's like a making a mug or riding a motorcycle or fixing stuff or just do nothing club or whatever it is. Like you have them all here, and then the girls are all here, and then the girls eventually start talking about stuff that's not just the trivia. So they start talking about their own personalities and their own lives and stuff like that. So this is a very standard setup. It's similar to that. Um, this again focused a little bit more on the competitive trivia, uh, as well as sort of the competitive or the people's personalities with regards to that sort of competitive aspect,
When
right?
you say competitive,
And,
like how competitive are we talking? Like
uh,
what is their broadcasting club about? What are they debating?
they're not debating. What they're doing is like they're entering this NHK Cup competition or something like that, which is based around again like either reciting passages from something like poetry or like prose, or it's like they're judging how cleanly you can do something like an announcement or broadcasting, like a PA announcement, right? So apparently there are these two categories, and a lot of the series is focused around setting up this like doing this world building around that sort of competitive language, that sort of competitive culture or whatever. Based again,
So
those recitations.
what's the other series about competitive pros when they were like sitting? I think
Chihaya
Nier
Fuda?
covered it. Yeah, was it
Are you
Chihaya
talking
Furu?
about? I think
What
I covered it, but I forget.
is it
But
better than Chihaya Furu?
Chai Furu, that's such a hard question. Chai Furu will always have a special place in my heart, and I personally feel that it's a little bit better. But the issue is like Chai Furu also has that like the romance subplot that kind of was like iffy at the best of times and like just not good at the worst of times. Dark also has trauma from that because he covered I believe season 2 or 3 or something like that, while I only covered season 1. So um
Nia, what was
I
your
think
series? What's was it Rakugo? Rakugo Kishi? Is that what I'm thinking of?
no, Bungo, what is it?
Mm,
I know what you're talking about. It was Showa Genraku Rakugo Shinju, right? It was,
No, it was.
that was a
I
series.
remember some chick. I'm fairly certain Nia covered it. What
Wait,
series am I
what?
I don't
thinking?
know. I don't know what you're talking about.
There was some girls
Uh,
sitting in kimonos reciting stuff. I believe
Oh,
it was the 4 girls, right? It was, I know what you're talking about. Joshiraku.
that yeah, that
Joshiraku.
one.
Yeah, thank you. That's the one.
Yeah, that one was also Rakugo, but
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
is it better than any of these series that I've mentioned?
Those are completely different because it's like those are very, very
Oh,
like not
lame.
like
I mean,
the good.
Yoshiraka was
I would say
also
the
like
good thing.
pure comedy.
Yeah, I would say the good thing about those Rakugo series is that they tend to focus a lot more on the Rakugo aspect, and again, I appreciate that more than like another series just heading down the sports competitive pipeline. Um, but this series is kind of heading down that pipeline. It's like it deals with trivia in a competitive manner. It deals with how the cast, the different characters kind of relate to each other and relate to themselves with regards to like facing this sort of competitive aspect uh in this field in and within themselves, like how do they want to deal with this sort of like competitive pressure, and while also maintaining their love for the thing that they're doing, right? Recitations. So again, in that sense, it's like similar, very similar to a sports series, but
I was
again, the
gonna say
theme is
like this
about.
sounds like a sports series, but it's kind of lame.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, but it's about like poetry recitations. And the feel is similar again to Chihaya Furu in that way, but there is no romance subplot involved really. As opposed to Chihaya Furu, which did have a lot of that like, love triangle aspect kind of bullshit going on here and there. But yeah, that's the general structure of the series. There's also obviously a decent dusting, sprinkling, dusting of implied beauty between Mizuki and Hana, as well as Hana and the other girls in the cast on the side for everybody because everybody at next year's Comic-Con or this upcoming year's Comic-Con will obviously try to make dojins and merch in the future of these like pairings. And there's like at least a couple of phrases that are very intentional that are thrown around that's like it's like, "I know you like me," stuff like that. It's, like, very, like, you wouldn't really say that, like, directly in real life or, like, it's like, "I wanna be loved by you," or something like that, like, stuff like these phrases that are very, like, on the nose purposeful and wouldn't really be used in situations like what they were in. So, there's a lot of, like, the author is sprinkling Yuri here and there. It'd be like, "Oh, you guys like this shit, right?" You guys like the Yuri, just eat it, the kind of stuff. So there's that sort of dusting of that girl's love. Um, one thing I did notice is that, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as I go. A lot of the other characters, to me, in my eyes, are kind of mainly set up to introduce the competitive aspect and trivia and the vocabulary of this world of recitations and broadcasting and read out louds, which is like, to some aspect, to some extent, you'd be like, "Oh, well, that's obvious." Like, that's the standard in a lot of competitive aspects where it's like, you just have, like, side characters pop up and be like, "This is an aspect about soccer that you might not have known." Like, you have a lot of characters like that. But, it seems like even the supporting characters that are supposed to develop the personality a lot of them are kinda set up to just showcase that sort of competitive, aspect. So, I'm not I'm a little bit mixed on that sort of setup, to be honest, because I kind of want characters that are like there, but then they're also slightly involved in, doing the recitations or whatever. So I want the what I mean by that is I want the characters to come before the theme. I don't want the theme to come before the characters. That being said, though, a lot of the characters that are presented in the story and direction are very, very, very like quiet and demure. There's no like, huh? What did you say? Like they're like cat fighting, and then it's like somebody's going and they're like running around the school because they're super genki girl or genki dude or whatever it is. There's none of this like hyperactive like or like super downer like oh I don't want to do anything or like super like lewd guy, like the anime, like ecchi, like oh, I'm gonna take a look at the girls' sauna or whatever the girls' hot spring area to take a look at their bodies. There's no like none of these like caricaturistic personalities that you would usually find in anime setups, right? Pretty much all the characters are very quiet, very demure, with an emphasis on that sort of reserved and modest part. And obviously, again, it works well in this setting, right? Because the setting is not some um like hot-blooded, like it's not like oh, I'm gonna kick this soccer ball so hard. It's not that sort of series, right? It's a series about poetry recitations. Um, the, characters also but within that, though, the characters do also tend to, like, suddenly kinda change moods here and there, like, just slightly, like, "Oh, I suddenly became a little bit more cheerful," or like, "Oh, I became a little bit quieter," or whatever. Um, which I do find that sort of writing is organic, especially since it's talking about kids in high school, right? Um, it's much better than them being just one tone or having one shtick 24/7 where it's like you have a side character that's like always tsundere or like you have a gyaru that's just like chill. Like it almost seems like she's just like high all the time. Like I'm just chill, like haha, I'm just watching these two guys argue. Like instead of having that like one tone, it's nice to have these sorts of variances because again, that's how it works in real life. Um, however, that sort of variance being said, um, a lot of them, and I think this is a lot of them are sort of leaning very hard on their main do lean a decent amount on their main shtick. Um, and this is sort of what I talked about before, right? It's like a lot of the other characters are sort of set up to introduce this competitive world of poetry recitations and how that theme works into the overall anime, or sorry, the overall like novel, right? Or manga, I think. Sorry, manga original. It's manga. And you can see that showing up in how the characters do tend to lean on these like shticks that they have. And by shticks, I mean like you can have a girl that's like, oh, I'm a cold competitive person on the outside. Uh that just I just want to win. I just want to win, bro. Or you have another character that's just like, I'm the president of this broadcasting club, and I'm kind of chill, but I got to get everyone together. So I'm actually the leader, and I do the leading thing, and I understand you, and I do the leading, and it's like that's just like her like 80% of her lines essentially. That's like what she's trying to do all the time, just like oh, I got to bring everybody together. Haha, I get you. I was like that too. I get you. No, I'm the leader, and it's like that's just like the same sort of good couple of tracks that she keeps repeating in the story. And then obviously, you have like Hana who's like, "Oh, I'm just like shy genius essentially." Um, so you have a lot of these like characters kind of leaning on these sticks, which in my opinion does detract a little bit from the human nature of the story. And it in a sense, it is inevitable because again, the sort of caricaturistic nature of something like an anime or manga, um, although it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Um, the fictional nature and how the story has to be paced, as well as I think the author has had a little bit of difficulty in trying to handle this bigger cast, and have them all interact with each other, all kind of grow in their own like respective kind of story arcs, right, and character development arcs. And because the author has had a little bit of trouble in doing that, I think some a lot of these characters have become a little bit flat tone wise. So that's a little bit of pity. Takes a little bit away from the human aspect, but I don't think it's like a huge detriment. And I understand why these characters are the way that they are in the story. Um, some more examples of this sort of thing is you have uh, a, a classic kind of paradigm, a classic story setup, trope, I guess you would say, between the main character, Hana, who has like her hidden natural talent, like her voice is really good. When she does recitations, everybody's like, whoa, whoa, oh, she sucks me in with her story. Versus like An, who is like essentially her classmate or like her club mate in the broadcasting club, who you know, has had experience going on these like competitive recitation kind of competitions, right? And she puts in a lot of effort and she's experienced and like that's how she wants to win by working hard and doing her effort. And she is kind of like she doesn't like the fact that Hana's kind of currently skated on by with her natural talent. So this whole like idea of like effort versus talent is a very, very, very cliche standard one that we um do see both in fiction and real life. But while I think it's not bad, the display of it was quite on the nose. It was very like, oh, just like episode two, boom. Here's a girl. She's experienced, but Hana's just a talented genius. And so what you gonna do? And the girl who's been giving it her all in terms of like being competitive in these like recitations. She's like, oh, I don't like it. I don't like that girl. How she's so talented, stuff like that. And it's like again, this is a very human thing, but I do think that sort of like it could have been displayed, I think, in the story a little bit better. And this whole like very simple um display of how that sort of like effort versus talent kind of thing plays out in an organic setting, I think it was a little bit too on the nose, and that kind of detracts points from it. Um, you also have another like very obvious example is something like you have expert come in, Shoji Sensei, again voiced by Koji, who's giving them like briefing lectures on like how to speak properly, like how to do these like, recitations such that you win at these competitions, right? So you'll have a lot of these like competitive experts who have like won competitions, who have been at first place in these competitions before, come back and like give lectures, right? And that happens in these sorts of clubs. It happens in like debate club. If it's
Free.
not at the club, it happens at like boot camps or something like that, right? So you'll have these people, but then the classic trope in an anime setting is like you'll have this expert like rate the newbies, right? Like the cast members that like they think they're so good or like they're just starting out, but then the expert rates the newbies, and the expert's like, huh, uh, you know, with this, you'll never be able to win a competition, guys. Like hey, you talents over there. You're like Sasuke. You're okay. Like you have some talent, but you're not a full fledged ninja yet. Stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like that's a very classic development that happens in anime or in these fictional sorts of stories. But the thing is, that sort of thing never happens in real life because all these experienced good instructors know that the way to go
Your
is
flow is whack, bitch.
yeah, you like nobody goes up first interaction with a student, right? Like you have a boot camp lecturer, you you're or talking with a student, and the first thing that they say is, I think you fucking suck balls. Nobody does that in real life. That's not a thing.
I watched
Uh,
Whiplash, and you're wrong.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I apologize. But yeah, unless it's like a football combine or the military, where that sort of thing is like meme levels of like, machismo. Oh, that's just like it comes with the territory, right? No matter how much that seems like a thing in anime, that's not what happens in real life. People, unless they're super familiar with each other and they're willing to kind of have that like weird conflict, harsher conflict just for emphasis, no instructor that you talk to at a boot camp for these sorts of things, or somebody who gives a lecture at a club or whoever, and you walk up to them, it's like, can you just like review? Can you help me with like a review? Nobody's gonna be like look at it and be like, kid, I think you have talent, but you'll never win competitions at this rate, or like something like be super critical like that. You know what I mean? It's like you guys all just suck right now. No instructor does this in real life. So, um, I think again the author tried to add a lot of human elements to it and a lot of these basic elements. Conceptually, they exist in real life. But I think whether it's due to the fact that in an anime it has to be a little bit spicier, more caricaturistic, more fictional, although again, I find that boring, or whether it's the fact that the author has a little bit of trouble balancing out these character developments because there are so many different characters in the cast that has to be worked on and developed. um, I think there are some points that can be taken away for it being a little bit too on the nose at times. So I think again, a lot of this like real life comparisons are coming from my own experiences as well, coming from a super competitive high school slash like club slash college whatever, and it's not like that. In real life, it's really not like that. People are definitely a lot more positive still. So I think it's a little bit unfortunate that some points had to be detracted from that. But I do think a lot of these elements are very they are references to actual things in real life, and I think the overall atmosphere of it is quite nice. Um, I kind of wish there was a little bit more about like the pros and like the recitation beyond just like the competitive like reading and like setting that up. But I guess the author just wanted to focus on the competitive aspect. A couple of, I guess, one or two other notes on the story. Note that this has very, very, very minimal amounts of like proper attempted comedy, like slapstick or non sequitur or stuff like that. So make sure you're aware of that. It's a very relatively low energy series. It's not like something. It doesn't really have comedic breaks or anything. It's just like it just keeps on going. It's like the competitive um it's competitive poetry recitations. What do you want? And it's even much more lower energy than Chiaifuru. Although Chiaifuru wasn't that low energy, it was relatively high energy because they're like slapping cards and like the trumpet music comes on, like the brass music comes on and stuff like that, and you're like, oh shit, so stuff's about to get real. Um, but it is quite low energy. It's like a s- it's like a it's like 1 degree above Tamayuta. And I know Nier doesn't want to hear that, but
What?
it's in a decent way.
Tamira's
It's
peak, dude. What do you mean?
yeah,
I definitely didn't
S-
fall
it's
asleep during
small
that.
slate. Yeah. But yeah, it is very low energy. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but you got to be aware of that when you come in. You're not gonna be like, oh, where's the kind of like elbow nudging? Where's the slapstick? Where's the like, non-sequitur humor? It's that's not that sort of series. Overall, I would say this is a decent second work by the Hibiki Euphonium author, but I think in a similar sense to how Hibiki Euphonium did pan out, I think the edges on this series, the story, are just like so ever slightly rough, and you can kind of feel that. Um, I think if there were just like a few tweaks to the cast members in terms of how they display their personality, how you know the character developments kind of worked throughout the episodes, that were not just like, "Oh, I'm competitive," or like, "Oh, I came into this club, now I gotta talk about competitive recitations, poetry recitals right now, and I gotta do the competition and all this competitive vocabulary and how to talk about accents and how to blah, 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 blah." And it's like, you don't a character doesn't have to be just about the theme. It can be about the character as well. So, um, I think that's a little bit of pity. Those sort of few more organic tweaks to the cast, in my opinion, could have probably made this a contender for anime of the season, maybe even anime of the year, but it didn't happen. So, yeah, very unfortunate. Uh, Overall, I'll probably give this series a 7 out of 10. I think giving it probably a 6.5 or 6 would be too downplaying it. It was quite solid. It went to a new place. It did like tried to do like a new kind of theme and work on it. It has like a slight nice like uncommon variant in terms of like its kind of like tension and like energy. But I think it falls flat in um trying to become something that is quite unique and like really interesting. I think it's missing that little bit of spark there, um, with regards to the characters. So a little bit unfortunate, but I think this is still a decent watch. Again, if you like this sort of series, it is again Hana Saku, Shura no Gotoku. This is Flower and Asura, also known as HanaShura for short. Manga original again by the Hibiki Euphonium author. Uh, and this is done by what is the Studio Bind? Yeah, Studio Bind, who also did like Mushoku Tensei, Onimai, Yorakura, stuff like that. So if you do like this, if you do want this sort of like relaxing pace tension, but still kind of talking about like competitive aspects here and there, which is like an interesting kind of contrast, right? If you want to check out that sort of contrast, please do check this series out.